So, Chainsaw Man. This is a story I've talked about before. I mean, it's an infamous manga that has pretty much everybody invested into its ridiculous and confusing, but surprisingly entertaining narrative, I will say. The story is ridiculous at times and a lot of crazy shit goes down, but for some reason this manga has gained mass popularity, and as I say that for pretty much every Chainsaw Man video I make, it turns out that every time I make a new video on this manga, it's gained even more popularity, which just blows my mind. Because when you look at Chainsaw Man compared to other manga, it doesn't have like that deep, intricate plot that a lot of the other competing manga have. And yet, it's more popular than 90% of those competing manga, and it's literally one of the most popular ongoing manga right now. It's crazy to me how this manga has gained so much popularity, and it's really surprised me how someone like me, someone who's so invested into detailed storytelling, has gotten invested into the world of Chainsaw Man. Everything about this manga seems ludicrous. I mean, the main character is a teenager who spawns chainsaws from his head and whose main drive is to have sex. Yet, as I mentioned, it has insane popularity, and I have had the pleasure of reading it and catching up to the second part of its manga, which is currently weekly or bi-weekly, I have no idea. I tend to fluctuate between periods of reading a ton of manga and reading pretty much nothing. Now that being said, I pretty much binged the entirety of part 1 in a couple weeks. Didn't really like the first 70% of it, but loved the last 30%. But when part 2 came out, I kinda didn't read it. It wasn't because I didn't want to, I just kinda felt lazy and didn't really feel like it. So to cut to the chase, I caught up to part 2 as it wasn't blindly obvious by the thumbnail and the title. It only really took me a couple of days, which is surprising because even though the chapters are really short, I don't really read manga that much anymore. In fact, instead of reading a bunch of manga that have been requested by you all, I'm deciding to reread Berserk again, which obviously isn't a bad idea, but when you got 100 manga to read and a channel to take care of, it's pretty stupid. The chapters were really short as I mentioned, and there isn't much heavy plot as I also mentioned. It's more of the same, yet it's even better. Like, what the fuck? Now, the story takes a darker turn, if you can even say that, because I mean, part 1 was pretty dark, let's be honest. We get introduced to Asa Mitaka, which is apparently the new protagonist, and the first chapter is incredibly Chainsaw Man-like. We get this ridiculous antagonist with even stupider powers, killing the main character because she's jealous of her liking the teacher of the class who she's sleeping with. Like, bro, what? What kind of psychedelics was Fujimoto on when he was writing this? It looks like 2 years of break in between parts had no change in his storytelling. But since Asa's the main character, she ends up getting revived, just like Denji got revived in chapter 1. As you can see, a lot of parallels with part 1, and it does not end here. Not much happened in terms of actions until a few chapters later, and to be honest, I'm not the biggest action guy. I'm all for building the story up, but to be honest, action is probably my favorite thing about Chainsaw Man, and I'll get to that later. We do get fairly important growth from Asa as a character, which is a bit contrary to Denji, because Denji didn't really develop that much in part 1. Instead, we have Asa, this character, who actually has more of a background than Denji, getting a lot more development, which I appreciate. She also resembles the complete opposite of Denji in the way she approaches challenges, which is obviously intentional. I like the route Fujimoto is taking with this, to be completely honest, because you have this absurd story, but it really seems like he's adding more to it through Asa's struggles with overcoming all the shit she's been through. And yeah, I know they always do this thing of killing the family and all that in Chainsaw Man, but to be honest, I don't care. Part 2's pacing and story is really resembling part 1, just with different characters, of course. Now, what surprised me is that there are so many cool characters that get introduced here. I was one of those people where after part 1, I was like, there's no way they're gonna bring any cool characters into the story. They killed off Makima, Aki, Howard. All these cool characters just got obliterated in the span of like 10 chapters. How are they gonna bring cool characters into the story? And then I got caught up and realized that Fujimoto is a genius at building characters. First of all, he removes pretty much the entire cast from part 1. Like, first of all, what the fuck? What kind of story removes the most integral characters, the most loved characters, and then manages to replace them with even better ones? That's insane. I really do like Yoru and her whole deal with Asa and Denji, and also the new fight with the Gordon Ramsay devil is pretty cool as well. It's currently what's going on in the manga right now at the time of uploading this video, I must say, it's not the craziest thing in the world, but I'm pretty sure we're heading to much crazier things. It is Chainsaw Man after all. As I mentioned briefly, the best part of Chainsaw Man Part 2 has got to be the fights. The fights have been insane as usual. The paneling has been insane as usual. The art is obviously as Chainsaw Man's art is, but the paneling is brilliant. When we get those spread panels of just Asa walking away from the fight, that is absolute class. The fight scenes are insane, they're ridiculous, they're over the top, but that is Chainsaw Man. That is the beauty of this story, and that's why thousands of people have fallen in love with it. That is why I managed to catch up to a manga when I barely read manga anymore. I can't say there's been anything too over the top from my read. Now, I'm talking about that in the context of plot, because if we're talking about over the top, there kinda is no top with this manga with the amount of insane stuff that it brings up, but that only further explains why this story is genius. For someone like me who wasn't quite invested in the story initially, I must say I'm very intrigued to see where these characters go, to see where the remainder of the plot goes, and to see how the story concludes. I really have no idea how it's going to conclude. In fact, I barely have any idea what is going on in the story right now, especially with the recent chapter, which confused the hell out of me. But again, it adds to how impressive that is, because being this confused by a story would probably mean that you're not that invested in it, and yet it's the complete opposite. This is why Chainsaw Man is genius, and this is what separates it from a lot of the other manga. Part 2 only builds on the importance and the genius of Part 1. But it is really hard to invest me in a story, and Chainsaw Man has done it. Despite being a manga I didn't think had the ability to do it. Part 2 only builds on Part 1, and I know for sure that it's really going to blow up, like crazy blow up pretty soon. It's already done so in the past, but the best is yet to come. I just have a feeling. Trust me, there's more in store with this manga. So why the fuck haven't you read it yet?